The case of Edgar Ray Killen is undoubtedly one of the most famous and shocking in American history, and his story still resonates throughout the nation. Killen was a man who, at first glance, could easily be mistaken for a simple Baptist preacher and sawmill operator. But he harbored a terrible secret. During the 1960s, he was also the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, in the small town of Philadelphia, Mississippi. It all began in 1964, when three young civil rights activists, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, went to Mississippi to help register black voters. During one of their trips, they were stopped by the police for speeding and taken to the local jail. It was a warm June night, and if they had stayed in jail, they might have avoided the worst. But, on Edgar Ray Killen's orders, a group of KKK members waited for the moment when the three were released to ambush them. When the activists were released from prison, they were kidnapped. Killen and his allies took them to a remote area, where they were brutally murdered. Their bodies were found only days later, buried in a landfill, and the car they were in was set on fire. This tragedy, known as the Three Martyrs case, sparked protests and outrage, but for many years the case was shelved, with Killen protecting himself by his image as a good preacher. Despite public pressure, the case seemed lost, and Killen, who had been a respected figure in the city, continued to live without suffering the consequences of his actions. But in 2005, something changed. A former KKK member, Mike Heather, decided to break his silence. He revealed that Killen was the mastermind behind the murders and that he had actively participated in the planning and execution of the crime. His courage in testifying opened the door for the case to be reopened. In 2005, after more than 40 years, the trial of Edgar Ray Killen finally took place. The city of Philadelphia, which had long seemed smothered by fear and secrecy, was now ready to face the truth. The trial was intense, with horrific details emerging during the 7 days of court. The prosecution brought to light not only the murders of the three young men, but also the climate of hatred and racism that permeated the city at the time. Defense attorneys tried to paint Killen as an innocent man, a preacher who would never have done something so terrible. But the evidence and testimony were all too clear. The centerpiece was the testimony of Mike Heather, the former Klansman, who told everything he knew about the murders. He revealed Killen's role in organizing the crime, showing how the Klan leader had mobilized other members to hunt down and kill the activists. Killen, then 80, was far from the respectable man his image as a preacher and community leader had made him out to be. He was charged with 3 counts of manslaughter, not first-degree murder, which meant the prosecution did not have to prove that he had premeditated intent to kill, only that he had been recklessly and negligently involved in the deaths of the young men. The verdict was announced in 2005. Edgar Ray Killen was sentenced to 60 years in prison, 20 years for each of the murders. The sentence was a partial victory for justice, but the case also revealed a deeply flawed justice system that took more than 40 years to fix. During the trial, many wondered why Killen, a man clearly involved in such a horrific crime, had not been prosecuted sooner, given his central role in the events. Despite the conviction, Killen did not live to serve his full sentence. He died in 2018, aged 92, after serving just 12 years in a Mississippi prison. His death came as a bitter reminder that, even after decades, not all those responsible for crimes of racism and violence have received the punishment they deserve. This case is a sad reminder of how institutionalized racism and violence can continue for too long, especially when the truth is stifled by fear and the protection of those in power. But it is also a testament to the importance of justice and the courage of those, like Mike Heather, who choose to speak the truth, even when it puts them in danger. Although Edgar Ray Killen lived most of his life with impunity, his trial and conviction finally brought a measure of justice, albeit a long time ago. Before we continue with the video, please make sure you are already subscribed to our channel. Here, we bring you shocking stories about criminals who made history, and you don't want to miss any details of these narratives, do you? So, subscribe now so you don't miss out on more content like this. And, of course, we are immensely grateful for following us on this journey. This other case is that of Ahmaud Arbery, which happened in February 2020, had a profound impact on the country and sparked a debate about racism, justice and vigilantism. Ahmaud, a 25-year-old black man, was just running through a neighborhood in Satilla Shores, Georgia, when 3 white men, Gregory McMichael, his son Travis McMichael and William Bryan, chased him in a car. They claimed, without evidence, that Ahmaud was involved in a series of robberies in the area, although he had not committed any crime. Instead of following the correct procedure, which would be to call the police or try to investigate the situation legally, Gregory and Travis, along with Brian, decided to take matters into their own hands. They grabbed a pistol and a shotgun and went after Ahmaud, as if he were hunting. The three men cornered Ahmaud and, when he tried to run away, Travis, with the shotgun, shot him 3 times, killing him. The scene was recorded by William Bryan, who was following the other 2 men with a camera, and unbeknownst to him, he would end up being a crucial piece in the process that would incriminate them. In the early days after the murder, the case seemed to be engulfed in silence. The police initially did not arrest any of the 3 men, and the investigation was slow. But in 2020, when Brian's video began circulating on social media, the story took a new direction. The video clearly showed the chase, the struggle, and the shooting of Ahmaud. Public backlash was immediate, and pressure on the authorities increased. Eventually, the 3 men were arrested and the case went to trial. The trial was tense and drew national attention. Throughout the trial, the defense tried to paint the defendants as men who were simply trying to protect the community, arguing that they believed Ahmaud was committing crimes. However, the evidence was against them. The video recorded by Brian was a key piece that left no doubt that the murder was intentional. Not only did he capture the moment Travis McMichael shot Ahmaud, but he also proved that the chase and shooting were without legitimate motive, leading to a clear conclusion that the crime was racially motivated. The court also addressed the racial issue at trial. It became clear that the pursuit of Ahmaud was not the action of citizens concerned about their safety, but of people who felt entitled to make judgments and take action on their own, based on racial prejudices. Throughout the trial, prosecutors argued that the 3 men had made the decision to shoot Ahmaud solely because he was black, which was central to the murder charge. The jury, after a fierce trial, found all 3 men guilty. Gregory and Travis McMichael were each given life sentences without the possibility of parole. William Bryan, the accomplice who filmed the chase and shooting, was sentenced to life in prison, but was granted parole after 30 years. This sparked debate, especially since he was in his 50s and was unlikely to be released from prison given the length of time he would have spent in prison. Even so, the decision was seen as an attempt to apply justice in a more balanced manner. The Ahmaud Arbery case not only resulted in the conviction of 3 men, but also had a significant impact on U.S. law. The trial led to the creation of new hate crime laws in the state of Georgia, a move aimed at preventing future racially motivated tragedies from happening. While Ahmaud's loss can never be erased, the case has become a landmark in the fight against racism and the search for justice for victims of racial discrimination. The trial was also a moment of reflection for the country, reminding everyone of the power of evidence and the importance of never letting racism and violence go unanswered. The death of Ahmaud Arbery, while a tragedy, resulted in changes that could save lives in the future, and that change was, in a way, a form of justice that, though belated, brought some comfort to his family and to all those fighting for a more just world. And now let's move on to another case. In May 2017, the city of Portland, Oregon, was marked by an act of brutal and racist violence. Jeremy Christian, who was on a public train, began to verbally attack other passengers. The train was crowded with people of different ethnicities and religions, and this seemed to be what angered Christian. He began shouting hateful words, insulting the people there, including a group of young black women. For no apparent reason, Christian launched into a speech filled with racism and aggression, verbally attacking the victims and then threatening to kill them. 2 women, Talia and Destiny, did not remain silent in the face of what was happening and tried to defend Christian's victims. Instead of stopping, Jeremy became even more aggressive. He then pulled out a knife and, in an act of unthinkable violence, attacked 2 passengers, Micah, who was trying to defend the women, and Rick Best, a man who also tried to intervene. Both were stabbed and died from their injuries. The scene was shocking to everyone present, and the police arrived quickly, but Christian had already fled, leaving behind the pain and panic he had caused. In the days that followed, news of the attack spread quickly. The case became even more serious when it was discovered that Christian had filmed and posted a video of racist speeches before the attack. This video would become an important piece of evidence in the court case. After the murder, Christian fled without remorse, but not for long. He was arrested and, 3 years later, the trial finally began. The process was long and full of revelations. During the trial, more than 40 witnesses were called to testify, and what became clear is that Jeremy Christian had a history of racist and violent behavior. The investigation showed that he not only killed 2 people in an unprovoked attack, but also had a history of previous assaults. He had attacked a black woman with a Gatorade bottle and attacked teenagers, including a young man wearing a black movement cap. This demonstrated that Christian not only harbored racial hatred, but also did not hesitate to act violently against people he considered different. The defense tried to argue that Christian was in an altered state of mind at the time of the attack, but the evidence was not in their favor. In addition to the video, witnesses from inside the train described Christian as a person clearly motivated by racial hatred. He was not simply frustrated or angry, he was acting out of deep-seated prejudice, attacking innocent people because of the color of their skin. The pain of the victims was also a central theme during the trial. Michael Fletcher, who was on the train and managed to survive the attack, gave an emotional testimony. He described how Christian's attack had traumatized him, saying that to this day he has vivid nightmares, such as a tunnel filling with blood until he drowns. Other family members of the victims also gave moving testimonies, sharing the devastating impact that the act of violence had on their lives. When the trial finally reached its verdict, the court was left with no doubt: Jeremy Christian had been convicted. He received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 51 years for other crimes, such as assault and illegal possession of weapons. Despite the severity of the sentence, Christian showed no remorse. During the trial, he made another death threat, saying that he would kill one of the victims again, this time in the courtroom, in front of everyone. This moment only reinforced Christian's lack of remorse and the dangerously disturbed nature of his behavior. Jeremy Christian's conviction was a relief for the victims and their families, but it was also a milestone in the fight against racism and violence. Society was shaken by the case, but at the same time, it sparked discussions about the need to address hate and racism more seriously. Christian, with his hate speech, ended up focusing on the importance of combating this type of thinking, so that tragedies like the one he caused never happen again. In the end, justice was served, but the scars left by the attack will never go away. Jeremy Christian's case served as a painful but necessary reminder that racism and violence cannot be ignored and that everyone has a responsibility to address these issues to ensure a more just future for all. This other case happened in Portland. A brutal murder shook the city in 2017, when Russell Codier committed an unthinkable crime. What started as a simple fight outside a store turned into an act of unspeakable violence, resulting in the death of Lionel Bruce. Codier, seemingly without reason, ran after Bruce and ran him over in such a brutal manner that security cameras recorded the scene, making it clear how determined he was to cause pain and suffering. The violence was not only physical, but also filled with hatred and prejudice. Security cameras and witnesses soon confirmed what happened. Russell Codier, a man with a disturbing history, was filmed running over Bruce in a shocking manner. But what really revealed how dangerous Codier was came to light with the discovery that he was a member of a white supremacist group, the European Kind. The group's logo was on his cap, and he also had a tattoo of the group on his leg. These details were not only symbolic of a twisted loyalty, but also a key to understanding the motive for his ruthless actions. Codier, motivated by racial hatred, acted with a level of violence that was difficult to comprehend. After the crime, Codier fled, but the evidence was clear. A baseball cap with the group's logo was found at the scene, and security footage confirmed his identity. The evidence against him was strong. Police quickly arrested him, and Codier, along with his girlfriend, who was also involved in the crime, was charged with first-degree murder. His girlfriend was charged with manslaughter, due to her role in the event. Codier's trial was a veritable legal battle. The courtroom was packed, with the families of Bruce and Codier facing off, and the public eager for justice. More than 40 witnesses were called, and the evidence showed not only the brutality of the crime, but also Codier's history with the white supremacist movement. Prosecutors focused on the fact that this was not just an ordinary homicide, but a hate crime, motivated by racism and bigotry. The footage of the hit-and-run, Codier's tattoos, and statements he made before the crime were presented as crucial evidence. The trial was not only a quest for justice for Lionel Bruce, but also a reflection of the social and racial issues that still plague society. The first-degree murder charge was the most serious that Codier could face, and the jury had to deal with the magnitude of the crime he had committed. During the trial, it became clear that Codier was motivated by racism, and the violence of his act could not be explained beyond the hatred he felt for people of color other than his own. When the sentencing came, the courtroom was silent. The victims' families, the jurors, and the public awaited the final decision. Cotillard was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision was historic, as it was the first hate crime conviction in Oregon in 3 decades. The sentence reflected the gravity of the crime, but for Lionel Bruce's mother, it was hard to believe that any punishment would be enough. With tears in her eyes, she stood to address the court, addressing Cotillard directly, "You allowed the devil to divert and take the life of such a beautiful and long-lived spirit. You took that life from us." Lionel's mother's words were a reminder of the irreparable pain Cotillard had caused. The emotional toll of the crime was devastating, and a life sentence, while significant, would not bring Bruce back. The pain of loss was something that justice could not heal, but Cotillard's conviction was an important step in combating violence and hatred. Russell Cotillard's case brought to light a bigger issue than the murder itself. It highlighted the devastating impact of racism and violence associated with extremist movements. While justice was served in that courtroom, many people believe it is just one step in a larger fight. The case served as a wake-up call to the need to combat hate in all its forms, so that tragedies like Lionel Bruce's never happen again. When the trial ended and the sentence was handed down, the city of Portland, and the world at large, reflected on what this crime represented, a bitter reminder that hate still exists in some parts of society and that the fight against it must be constant. These cases are a grim reminder of the devastating impact that hate, prejudice, and violence can have on our society. From crimes motivated by racism to tragedies marked by intolerance and lack of empathy, each case reinforces the need to fight for justice, equality, and respect among people. If you enjoyed this content and want to continue exploring stories that make us reflect on the world around us, leave a like to help spread this message. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like these, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which of these cases impacted you the most, and what do you think we can do to build a better society? Your opinion is very important, and together we can promote discussions that lead to positive change. Thank you for following, and until next time.